Uh, yeah, welcome everybody. Just give you a moment to come on in, settle down, get yourself a morning beverage if it's that time of day, or an evening beverage, depending on where you're at and how you roll. We're gonna be talking, we're gonna be talking about a bunch of stuff this week. Mostly we're gonna be talking about twins and talking about the sun's ingress into Gemini, as well as Jupiter's ingress into Gemini. Actually, let me just pull out my handy dandy astrological planner, which for those of uh, uh, Gina Maria, I will get you the best weather forecast that I possibly can. But yeah, I'm gonna pull out my astrological planner, which is this honeycomb planner. These things are fantastic, by the by. They have all the transits of the week, as well as like some blank note pages, and tells you what's going on. And this is by a group called Honeycomb. And this is my secret. This is how I know what's happening, and how I can stay up to date with everything that's going down in space. And so let me just give you a brief overview of what's going down, before we jump into the nitty-gritty of it all. Today, Monday, May the 20th, the sun ingressed into Gemini. That happened at about 6 in the morning Pacific time, making that 9 in the morning Eastern time. And then we get the sun trining Pluto in Aquarius on Wednesday, the 22nd. We have the full moon on Thursday, the 23rd, and we have a pretty auspicious full moon. For those of y'all who are interested, we have a conjunction of the greater benefics Venus and Jupiter, which will be occurring on the 23rd, right as we're getting that Sagittarius full moon. And we also have Venus moving into Gemini, and Venus and Jupiter in a supportive sextile with Neptune. Um, and then on Saturday, we have Venus, who has just come into Gemini, coming into a supportive trine with Pluto, who's retrograde through Aquarius. And then the big news of the week, on Saturday, the 25th, we have Jupiter going into Gemini, which is the sign of their detriment. And so yeah, I wanted to, like, since it's Gemini season, I just wanted to give you the information up front and then we'll talk about it. But that's sort of the layout for the week. And well, I'll open my energy beverage and we'll go deeper into what all these things might mean for you and yours. And look at them through maybe a philosophic, alchemical, mythological lens. We'll see what strikes our fancy. It's Gemini season. We can just talk. It doesn't need to go anywhere. It can just go in circles, right? And I want to say, full transparency, I am a raging Sagittarius, and so I have some biases against about. I have some thoughts about Gemini. And I also appreciate getting to do this practice and this process because it has really kind of deepened my understanding of the sign of Gemini. Because it was very easy for me to be like, oh, they're just like talk, 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 little gossips, little chatty Cathys out there, and it's much more than that. But my I do have like very strong Sagittarian sensibilities. So I just want to put that out there because, this might be skewed a little bit, but I will do my best. And I think this is at the core of the Gemini archetype, is being able to hold two things at once, right? Oh, I imagine that there are some Gemini in the audience, and I think, again, I think Gemini is, all the signs are beautiful in their own way, and I think that with pop astrology, right? And astrological memes, which I think are very funny. There's a way of kind of flattening things out to their most kind of comical or base nature. And I think one of the things that I like to do with my Monday morning rants is try to inject a little bit of the mythic to kind of expand our ideas of what these signs and archetypes can mean. And so, at the very core of the Gemini archetype, I think it is the duality of all things, the ability to hold two things at once. Um, right. So I can, me as the Sagittarian hater, I can be like, oh, they're like, don't care about the truth and they just want information, which can be true. And also, there can be deep wisdom in the curiosity of the Gemini archetype, in the ability to ask questions and the ability to sort of like take in information and gather information. Right. And so I think a real central piece of this Gemini archetype is the duality of life and the polarity of things and the ability to hold two things at once. And I think this is one of the things that I've been considering um, as the sun makes this ingress into Gemini, and as I've been kind of rereading the mythology and thinking and considering. Right. And astrology being a hermetic art, and the kind of core of hermeticism, or one of them, right, is the kind of being able to hold these opposites, right? Holding the opposites until a secret third thing emerges. And this is, we can think about this as like alchemical or Jungian, right? To be in the tension of the opposites, and like to wait there in that like kind of excruciating tension, and not needing to know even though we want to, right? And then like that is a tension of the opposites as well, right? And to be able to like sit there and hold both of these things until something else emerges. And I think this is a deep alchemical process, and I think this is kind of the wisdom of Gemini, right? Is the reminder of the separation and duality of all things, but also how these two things are in the end connected and united, right? And this is, I think that like hermetic and alchemical wisdom, you know, and our Lord and Savior Hermes Trismegistus, right, who is the ruler, right? Mercury, Hermes, the ruler and the patron saint of Gemini. And so this ability to hold like left and right, up and down, back and forward, right, light and dark. Order and chaos. And I think that is a really big theme, not only of Gemini, but also what we are stepping into at the end of the week, as Jupiter, who is a planet of wisdom and harmony, moves into Gemini, which is a sign that has a lot to do with, questioning these things, questioning the orders, questioning why is this harmonious? What is this doing? Who is this harmonious for? What is the cost of this? And we'll step into this a little later, but Jupiter is like, this is how it is. And Gemini and Mercury are like, but why? But why is it like that? Right? Which can, for Jupiter, and maybe for the Sagittarian, it can be kind of maddening, right? Which is looking for truth as a cohering, principle, looking for meaning. And Gemini's like, that doesn't matter, right? Look over here. Let's go ride bikes, right? And Sagittarius and Jupiter can be like, oh, you meddling kids. And so, where am I going to go from here? Um, okay. So, I guess we can start with sort of the mythology of Gemini as just as a entry point, as we are welcoming the sun into the sign of the twins. And I think the kind of core myth related to the constellation of Gemini is the myth of Castor and Pollux, who were these two heroes. And they were twins and sons of Zeus and Leda. Uh, Zeus as the story goes, Zeus comes down in the form of a swan and seduces Leda. There's actually uh, kind of preamble to this story. Zeus comes down in the form of a swan, which is interesting because that's the bird of Aphrodite. Mercury comes down in the form of an eagle, which is the bird of Zeus, and like pretends to attack Zeus so that Zeus can, in the form of the swan, sort of run away and pretend to be wounded, and then lands in Lita's lap and is like, "Oh, rescue me!" and then turns into back into his Zeus god form, and they do it. And then Lita lays 2 eggs 9 months later, and in one of the eggs is Pollux and Helen, and these are both the immortal twins. And then the other one is Pollux and Clytemnestra. Castor and Clytemnestra, who are the mortal twins. So we have two sets of twins. Two of them are mortal, two of them are immortal. They all hatch out of eggs. And so the kind of like a beginning of the story, we have like trickery, we have shape shifting, we have sort of illusion and some mercurial kind of shape shifting and tricky business, which then like kind of continues on as like human and immortal children are birthed out of eggs. Um, it's interesting in researching this. There's also another set of twins that I'm not really going to get into because I haven't done a lot of study on them. But it's interesting that when we like generally talk about Gemini, we're talking about Castor and Pollux, right? The male twins. Um, and we kind of forget about Helen and Clytemnestra, who have their story kind of unfolds through the Trojan War, but they're not spoken about in the same way as like Castor and Pollux, who are very much like two sides of the same coin, and they do everything together. And there are these heroes who are on the Argos with Jason and the Argonauts, and they do all this stuff. They are the tamer of horses, and then one day they are going on a cattle raid, which is a very mercurial thing, with this other set of twins, and they all get into it, and Castor is killed. The mortal one is killed. And Pollux kind of loses it, right? Because he has never functioned without his brother, right? His brother, Castor, is the sort of flip side of him. He balances him out. He is the mortal to his immortal. And so cast this is the thing with twins, you keep mixing them up. Pollux finally goes to Zeus and is like, "Hey, I know this is a big ask, but can you bring my brother back? Because I can't function without him. I will trade my immortality for him." And Zeus gives in, Castor and Pollux being his children, and brings them together again. And this is the piece that I find interesting about this story. In some of the myths, they are together, but they are either in the heavens and in the cosmos, right, as the constellation of Gemini, which is where Zeus places them, or they are in the underworld. And in some versions, they get to be together, but one is always up there and one is always in the underworld. And so they are like, again, the two sides of the same coin. They are this mirror reflection of each other, but they are separated, you know. And this is the piece that I find really fascinating about the archetype of Gemini and the kind of two sides of the same coin and the twin nature of things, that we have the celestial and we have the underworld. We have the celestial, which is this ordered cosmos, and then we have the underworld, which is the unconscious and the chaos. And I think this is we have the Castor and Pollux who are together doing everything, two sides of the same coin, in this very enmeshed relationship, where they're finishing each other's sentences. And then we have this separation where they show up as very kind of opposite pieces, right? Order and chaos, upper world and underworld. And so this makes me think about some other twin myths. the first one that comes up is the myth of Inanna, who is the queen of heaven and earth, and her sister Ereshkigal, who is the queen of the underworld. And that sort of relationship, right? And Ereshkigal is seen as the shadow, everything that is like pushed away, everything that is shunned, everything that is stuck, in the chaotic realms of the underworld, whereas Inanna is the sort of divine queen, who then makes the choice to descend from her throne and open her ear to the great below and go and meet her sister Ereshkigal and become initiated and rejoin that union and that connection. And from there, we can also think about this idea of the wild twin. And I should have had this book. Hold on, I'm just going to grab it for a second. I'm like, which pile is this book in? But I've been reading this book, Martin Shaw, Courting the Wild Twin, which is a really good, very simple and well-written exploration of a couple fairy tales, the Lindworm and Shaggy Top, which are both Grimm fairy tales. And basically Martin Shaw's idea is that there is the wild twin, right? And this is maybe like the idea of the daemon, that when we are born, there is our double, our doppelganger, our wild twin, our daemon who is born with us, who, walks with us through life, but is invisible. Or sometimes they are shunned and thrown into the forest, and where there is the light twin who is living in the societal structure in the family system, who is honored, right? Who is like, oh, you're going to go to college and you're going to marry a wife and then you're going to take over the farm or whatever, that family story is. There is the wild twin who is ugly or is misshapen, who is shoved into the forest, who is in the like chaotic realm, but that wild twin is connected to the energy and the flow of life. They are kind of the instinctual nature, right? That is sort of kicked out of the polite society, right? Who doesn't have a place in the kind of world of, you're gonna like grow up and marry a wife and take over the farm. And in the story of the Lindworm, when the light twin goes out to do that, they are met by their brother who is a dragon, who is like, absolutely not. Older brothers marry first, right? And because he was 2 minutes older, he prevents the light twin, we'll say, from or the good one, right, from marrying or having a fulfilling life, because there is an unmet need in the family system. There is an unmet need in the soul because of this sort of separation, and the instinctual, the wild nature has been like kicked to the curb and exiled into the forest, and that needs to be remedied and made whole before the hero can progress and carry out their trajectory of individuation, of living a full meaningful life. And so as the sun enters into Gemini, and I'm thinking about all this twin stuff, I think about this idea of the daemon, the wild twin, our double, right? And what they might be doing now. Yeah. And I had this conversation the other day. I don't know if this is I don't know if this is going to take us down a dead end cul-de-sac, but we're just going to find out. We're going to go with curiosity, which I think is a great Gemini word, very mercurial word, curiosity. But I was having a conversation with a couple astrologers the other day, Lindsay Turner, who is the bad pastor, Sam Reynolds, and Michael Bartlett. I'm fortunate enough to live in proximity to these people, so we can like hang out in person once in a while when we're not all incredibly busy. And we were sitting there talking, and Sam was like, who do you think you would be? Like, do you ever think about what your parallel lives might be doing right now? Which I think is also a really good question to ask of the wild twin, right? Like, when we zig, when we could have zagged, what do you think would have happened? What do you think the parallel yous are doing right now? Or another way of putting this is like, what do you think your wild twin is doing? And what do you think they might need? And how do we get in better communication with them? How do we touch in with the wild twin? As we are sort of living, trying to live out and support the stories that we are constructing for ourselves. And I think a lot of these are connected to survival needs, because in a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need to like have food and shelter and water and our basic needs met before we get to like self-actualization at the top. And that is just the structure that we're in right now. And so a lot of the choices that I feel like I've made are based around, in some part, survival needs. And the wild twin maybe doesn't care so much for that. Uh, Maybe the wild twin is like knows how to survive because that's part of their function, and they are seeking for something else. Maybe they're seeking something out of polite society. Maybe they're seeking something that doesn't have a career trajectory or stability, right? And I wonder the ways in which I kind of reject that wild twin out of fear. Oh, this will never work out. I don't see the logical conclusion of this. This doesn't make any sense. Because I think that the wild twin brings in that irrational nature. It brings in that chaotic nature. It brings in that desire and hunger, which can be really threatening for a system of coherence. And I think we'll talk more about this when we get to Jupiter entering into Gemini, because I think Gemini really threatens the cohering structures of a Jupiterian ideal. And so another thing that I want to bring in, maybe we're all over the place, but I think that is the vibe. I think this is the transference of Gemini season coming through, is just being like here and then here and then here and then here. Oh, congratulations on closing out the last chapter of survival mode decades. Yeah, and I wish you much abundance, Gina Maria. I hope that you are stepping into a chapter where everything is gravy, and that is my wish for you. So another kind of reflection on this wild twin idea. Um, Somebody sent me, my friend Frank sent me, we were having dinner the other night talking about this thing, and Frank was like, "Oh, I just watched this like YouTube or no Instagram video of it was uh David Shands, who I think does the Social Proof podcast, interviewing a fellow named Myron Golden, who I believe is a business coach. I don't really know either of these people, but it was pretty fascinating. And Myron Golden was talking about how trees grow. He was like, "You ever think about how a tree grows?" Right? A tree grows both up and down simultaneously. And the down part, right, the root system kind of mirrors the branches. And so they're talking about how the subterranean part of the tree grows in the darkness, in dampness, right, into resistance. And if it were to see light, or if it was to be dry, right, it would kill off the tree. And so it is like doing all of this work under the surface of the earth, pushing through all of this resistance in this dark, loamy soil. Whereas the above part of the tree, the part that we see, grows away from that resistance, right? It grows against gravity, and it grows towards the light. And just to think about how the upper, right, the light twin mirrors the dark twin, right? The subterranean part, the root system. And, we can think about the wild twin as the one who is digging in the dark, right? Who is sort of spreading out and mirroring the upper part. And maybe it is our wild twin who is making, in the upside down, who is making the pathways for us to grow into the light. Another way of thinking about this, which Myron said, is, you can't grow up unless you grow down, right? That we are sort of, yeah, if you are unwilling to grow down, you cannot grow up, is the quote that he said, which I think is really important to consider, right? As we are sitting in this Gemini time of holding both of these, holding the opposites, holding the above part of the tree, the fruit bearing part that everybody gets to see, right? The like me up here being like blah 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 blah, astrology this, Gemini that, blah blah blah, right? And the subterranean part is the like piles of books everywhere, that I'm like wandering around my house reading and making notes of. And this is not just for this, but it's like years of this. And that is the sort of root system, like fighting against the tension and the resistance of the soil and the rocks and everything that is around, right? That is the hidden part. That is the kind of nighttime part, whereas the light or the daytime part of the Gemini is maybe like what we see on the surface. So instead of looking at it like that, we are maybe looking at the glyph on its side, the above and the below, and there is the union of that, right? As above, so below, as above, and that kind of relationship. And I think that's really important to remember as we move forward, to think also not how we are growing towards our goals, but how we are growing down, right, into the earth to like support them in the unseen work that is happening. And this is consciously and also unconsciously. This is, maybe we can also think about this as like our conscious self growing in the above part, and maybe spiritual aid or the daemon or that wild twin growing in the below part, who is also helping to root and support us. And so those are a couple of the ideas that I had, thinking about Gemini and Gemini season. And I'm sure we will continue to unpack these as we go throughout the month. But perhaps we should move on. So Wednesday the 22nd, we have the sun who just moved into Gemini, trining Pluto at 2 degrees and 1 minute. And so this will be active in the full moon chart, the full moon of Thursday, May the 23rd. But I think that the trine with the sun in Gemini to Pluto in Aquarius, right, is helping to really key into that wild twin, to the unconscious, to that the darker nature, to the shadow side, right? This is maybe like opening communication with the shadow or that wild twin and seeing what do you have to say? What is being revealed from this sort of unconscious place. Pluto, I think about as the unconscious, right? It is the collective unconscious. It is our survival needs. It is how we show up being like, ooh, thanks for the coffee. How we show up in that like survival fear that is maybe like older than the body that we inhabit, right? Maybe this is generational, maybe this is ancestral, maybe this is from past lives, and it lives with us, right? And it lives in the collective, and it is the planet of death, birth, and transformation. It is the composting so something new can grow. And as the sun moves into Gemini, maybe this gives us some opportunity to think about, okay, what have I been needing to let go of, and what does this create space for? How do I ask the difficult questions of myself and the world? Or like, can I create a little space for that wild twin to be present? Um, uh, should I be scared being an Aquarius? Um, I think that is a complex and nuanced question, Sarah. I don't think that there is anything to fear but fear itself, first off. And Pluto, it depends on, where your sun is in Aquarius. And Pluto, like, helps us to be our best selves, right? We go through this process of transformation so that old ideas that are no longer serving us can be released and composted, so that new things can be born, right? That we can emerge with a new an alignment. We can emerge more in alignment with our authentic self, I think, is the Plutonian ideal. And Pluto, I like to think of the glyph as a cauldron, which is sort of boiling and boiling all the impurities from the self. It is an alchemical sign, right? Or alchemical planet that is getting rid of the impurities so that we can be our authentic self. And that can be really challenging because sometimes it sucks when impurities are burned off. And Sarah, if you're interested in looking deeper into your chart and what this might mean for you specifically, I'm available for astrology readings. I do my readings on Saturdays or Sundays. I'm still updating my schedule for whatever the next month is for June. But reach out and maybe we can get you a reading and talk more about what's going on for your chart specifically with Pluto going through Aquarius. Um, but I think that with the sun shining on Pluto, this is the sun, right? A trine is a harmonious aspect where the sun is, casting a ray on Pluto, which is like usually in the underworld in the dark. And this is a moment where, there's a harmonious relationship between sort of the solar identity, the hero's journey, and Pluto, which is transformation, but is also power, right? And so to think about this is happening between air signs, which is the intellect. So the power of the intellect, the power of communication. And I think the power of being able to hold these opposites, right? And what that feels like to just slow down and hold these things and to see what happens in that like kind of magnetic charge between the this and the that in these kind of liminal spaces, right? And we can think about, Mercury, who is a god of crossroads and thresholds, right? And these sort of liminal spaces. So we can think about, the sunrise and the sunset as these mercurial spaces, and that tension of the opposites between day and night, and that space, that secret third thing in the middle. And I think my favorite thing of the 21st century is the invention of the concept of a secret third thing. I use Placidus. That's a really good question. I'm not sure what housing system that Sam uses. I know that Bad Pastor uses whole sign. I started off in evolutionary astrology, so I learned Placidus from Stephen Forrest, and I've just stuck with that. And I will go back and forth between whole sign when I'm using more traditional timing techniques. But for me, it's just like every time I look at it, I'm like, that looks wrong to me. And so I don't know. Uh, it's a personal preference, but one of the things that I kind of hold to also, and I heard this from Rick Levine in a lecture that he gave years ago. He was like, there's like 37 different housing systems. Like, if we knew what the right one was, we would just use one, but we don't. So like they're all valid in their own ways, and I think it's just personal preference. Um, Okay. Yeah, I've never had that conversation with him. I sort of want to, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. But yeah, I'm always curious, and I'm sort of leaning more towards whole sign as I'm learning more traditional techniques. Um, um, ooh, whole sign. I have a question from Sarah about what's the difference between whole sign and quadrant housing. So basically, whole sign is whole sign is um each house, like each house encompasses the whole sign, 30 degrees of the entire sign. So that means if you have a rising at say 20 degrees of Cancer, your first house is Cancer and the ascendant is floating in it. And then the second house is Leo, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third house is Virgo. With quadrant housing, if you have the ascendant at 20 degrees Cancer, your first house is starts at 20 degrees Cancer with the ascendant and then moves out from there. And so it's a more as I understand it, it takes into account like the shape of the Earth and our relation to it. The amount of daylight that's in the sky in the winter versus the summer, et cetera. It has more of a like geocentric accuracy, I guess is a way of putting it. Whereas whole sign is just like doesn't matter, right? Like 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees. And there are benefits and drawbacks to both of them, and I think it's a kind of personal preference. But basically, with whole sign, you have the angles ascendant, descendant, midheaven, and IC as floating points. And then in quadrant housing systems like Placidus, you have the angles as gateways into the first, 10th, seventh, and fourth houses. And I don't know. I think that there are benefits to both of them. Um, and what I heard when I was studying with Stephen Forrest is like in an evolutionary context, it doesn't make sense to use whole sign. I don't know if that's true or not, and I think that with the traditional astrology, it's a lot harder to use some of the traditional timing techniques uh and Time Lord techniques with quadrant housing. But again, it's personal preference. There is definitely a Twitter battle that is raging about this right now, and like there is a lot of animosity between these two camps. And maybe this is a great segue back into what we were talking about, is like, how do we hold both these things, right? How do we hold whole sign and Placidus, or the people who are, very this is the way. And I think that this is the mercurial, the gift of Mercurius, right? To be curious, to be like, why and what if, and how could I combine these, or what if I did something different? What emerges if I hold both of these and just sort of like let my eyes fog over as I look at the chart. So on Thursday, May the 23rd, we have a pretty big day. We have the full moon in Sagittarius at 2 degrees and 55 minutes. This will be happening. The full moon will be exact at 6:53 in the AM Pacific time, making that 9:53 AM Eastern time. So if you want to do your full moon magic the evening before, on Wednesday night, probably. And I recommend, if one was to do magical workings, depending on what your magical workings are for. But if you are trying to work with increase and culmination of things, I recommend doing it as the moon is still waxing before it gets completely full. And then if you want to start letting things go, you want to do that after the moon has reached its culminating point and is beginning to dissipate a little bit. And I saw a great talk from Austin Coppock talking about the moon and ways of working with the moon. And he was saying that the full moon, right, the like total culmination, which would be right at about 7 a.m. on Wednesday morning Pacific time, 10 a.m. Eastern time. He was like, that's a little like too spicy, right? He's like, think of that as like a full cup of coffee, like hot coffee all the way to the brim. Like that's not really how you want your coffee, right? You want it like pretty warm, pretty hot, and like, a little space, a little room for cream, right? So something to consider if one were doing some workings with that. I am not going to talk about the full moon in this episode, and I'm going to tell you why. Because on Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time, making that 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time and 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, I'll be doing a full moon conversation with Bear Hickman from Ursa Day Astrology. They have a podcast called Inspired Astrology Podcast, and I am fortunate enough to be a guest on that show for the full moon episode. So me and Lauren will be talking, or me and Bear will be talking all about the full moon in Sagittarius. So I urge you to tune into that. You can catch it live on the AstroStar app. Or Lauren or Bear will release it on their podcast, the Inspired Astrology Podcast, whenever that comes out. So yeah, I urge you to check that out. And if you're not already a member of AstroStar Live, check out that app because it's excellent. I did a great talk there the other night on the astrology of fashion. And I just want to thank everybody who tuned in for that. I hope everybody had a good time and a blast breaking that all down. So I don't want to like dwell too long on my advertisements, but I do hope that you join me and Bear on Tuesday night to talk about the Sagittarius full moon, and that will like leave us a little extra time here to talk about some other stuff, like a couple aspects that we're getting on Thursday the 23rd, which are going to be exact during this full moon, but I'll take a little time to talk about them now, because we have Venus conjoining Jupiter at the spooky old anaretic degree of Taurus. This will be happening Thursday, the 23rd, during that full moon period. So this is an interesting one, right? We have Venus and Jupiter, who are the benefics, right? So we have the joining of the benefics, and we have the joining of the benefics at the last degree of Taurus. The anaretic degree is a little haunted. It's a little spooky. There's a lot of energy there. It is that sort of like last moment of a sign where we can think about all of the energy of the entire sign culminating up to this like moment. And it's like pretty fraught, right? There's like a lot of mojo there. And so while this is a meeting of the benefics, I think it is like the meeting of the benefics at this very charged spot. And another way that I think about this is Venus is the ruler of Taurus. So Jupiter has been hanging out in Venus's Airbnb, in Venus's house, for the past year, and this is sort of like Venus coming back and getting the keys and returning the security deposit and being like, "Hey, how was your stay?" And I see this as sort of like a debrief between the benefics. Venus being like, "Oh, did you like my place? What do you think? How did it go?" And I think that this is a opportune time to really consider what your experience, what our experience, what the experience of Jupiter and Taurus was like. How did that, what is our orientation towards simplicity, towards pleasure, towards joy, towards the body, towards the earth, towards taking it easy? And I was talking with Barry yesterday, in preparation for the podcast that we're going to do, or the talk that we're going to do. And one of the things that came up for me is that I think the time of Jupiter and Taurus for me allowed like more leisure time, more relaxation. That's something that I've been like really trying to carve into my life, and trying to let go of that voice that's like, you should be or you need to be, and being able to entertain the voice that's like, whatever, I don't always need to be productive. And I can read for pleasure, or I can just like, lay in bed and watch TV, and that's chill, without guilt. And so that's one of the things that I've been trying to orient towards, or that I think that I have oriented towards, as Jupiter has moved through Taurus. But I think with the Jupiter coming in contact with the landlord, right, the homeowner, the ruler of Taurus on the full moon, I think that this is this culminating moment of like, oh, like it's revealed. I can see this, what was that like? What did I learn? What did I get? How does it feel? And so maybe take a couple days and just think about your relationship to the Taurian themes of, sensuality, of pleasure, of resources, of values. Right? What are the resources that you went in with, and what are the resources that you've gathered now? Taking stock of our resources, and noticing kind of like where we're at with our value system, and what brings us pleasure, and the nice things that we got. And I think that's really important, you know. So also on Thursday, the 23rd, we have Venus and Jupiter sextile to Neptune at, again, the spooky old anaretic degree. And I have a sense that Jeff is going to ask me a question about Neptune that I'm not prepared for. But let's just see how this goes. So yeah, Neptune is like just holding it down at the last degree of Pisces, which is a Jupiter ruled sign, and Venus is exalted in Pisces. So we have Neptune in this sign where both Venus and Jupiter have a lot of cred, right? It's Jupiter territory, and Venus like is exalted. They are raised up there, like they're Venusian people in Pisces, and Neptune's hanging out there at the last degree there, right? Kind of maybe unpacking or like figuring out what it's learned through this long journey through Pisces, through the outer realms of Pisces. And one way that I think about this, again, as I was looking at the full moon chart, is like almost like a graduation, right? That Jupiter's graduating their time in Taurus, and this is sort of like graduation season. And I think that graduation has been like very fraught this year, which I think is interesting. Um, and if we can like separate that out for a moment, right? The kind of ideal of graduation of you are stepping into a new place, like your hopes and dreams for the future. And I think that's very much what Neptune is our hopes and dreams, this our imagination. Right. What we are imagining will happen as we move on to the next level, as we move on to the next thing. And I think that this sextile, which is a communicative aspect, really helps Jupiter and Venus to think about, okay, what is the ideal that I am striving towards? How do I really want to feel as I step off this cliff into this new territory, into this new world, and all this information in Gemini? How do I want to feel? You know, what do I want it to be like? What is the intention that I'm setting here? I think the other kind of flip side of that can be like a uh, disillusionment, right? And you know, Neptune has a lot to do with glamour and celebrity, right? And getting lost in the fantasy. And as Jupiter and Venus are leaving Taurus, which is a very kind of like grounded, practical Earth sign, a lot to do with resources, there may be this like, oh, if I only had more, right? Oh, I should be what they are. Kind of that Neptunian longing for somebody who has more or somebody who has what we think we want, you know. And I think, again, coming back to all of this Gemini information, is that there can be this like projection of this is me and that is the twin, that is the other, right? Subject and object, right? That, oh, if I only had what they had, or they have more than me, or they're better than me, or whatever that kind of value judgment is. And I think the wisdom is to reclaim that and be like, I have what I need, right? And that sort of it is more of the inner journey of recognizing the resources that we have in an internal system instead of longing for what we perceive that somebody else has that we don't, which I think that the Neptune sextile, although it's supportive, can also have us be like, oh, that's what I'm striving for. And one of the things that I would urge you again in our kind of inventory of the resources in Taurus that we've experienced is being, instead of being like, this is what I don't have, or this is what I'm striving for, being like, what do I already have? What is the foundation that I'm moving from? Or coming back to our, you know, wild twin of the tree roots, what is already working under the surface? What are the roots that I've been cultivating that are supporting my the growth of my fruiting body? Okay. So I want to skip ahead because I only have about 10 more minutes, and I don't know how this happens. But I think one of the most important transits of the week, and they're all important in their own ways, is that Jupiter enters Gemini on Saturday, May the 25th, and Jupiter will be in Gemini until June the 9th of 2025. And so Jupiter is coherence, right? Jupiter, king of the gods, right? Lord of Olympus, right? The kind of ordered cosmos and the way that Jupiter brings those into societal structures that create order, wisdom, justice, harmony, right? And so Jupiter is reflecting these ideals through societal systems like religious systems, the church, right? Or spiritual practices. Institutions of education, higher learning, the legal system, right? All of these sort of structures that like hold society together in the like ideal, and we're talking in a ideal context right now. We'll get into the sort of like the nitty-gritty of it in a minute, but Jupiter is really related to all of these institutions that make a coherent societal structure, right? Based on harmony, truth, justice for all, wisdom, blah, 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 right? And so as Jupiter enters into, and in Taurus, it's been like, what are the resources that support this, right? And as Jupiter enters into Gemini, sorry, I'm laughing, but it's like, woo, man, right? Jupiter is in their detriment in Gemini, and where Jupiter is like, this is a coherent system, right? Gemini is like, why? And Jupiter's like, because it is, and Gemini is like, but why? Right? And so the sort of coherent ideal of the Jupiterian truth becomes questioned at every turn, which can be maddening to the Jupiter and maddening to the system. You think about Jupiter as the teacher and Mercury as the student, right? Who is and Gemini is like constantly curious and questioning the structure and why we're doing this. And so, as Jupiter enters into Gemini, and again, Gemini, and we've talked about this being able to hold multiple truths and holding two things, and Jupiter that really wants one coherent truth, right? That is what their goal is to be like, this is the truth. From all of this information, I am like extracting this thing and it's the truth. And Gemini is like, oh, hell no, that's not how it works here, buddy. Right. And so there's this story, and I got this from Joseph Campbell's A Hero with a Thousand Faces, but it is not his story. It is an older story that he tells and I'm retelling, but this is about Ishu, who is a Yoruba trickster, right? The crossroads god. It's the Yoruba kind of embodiment of Mercury, right? The archetype of Mercury in that practice, in that religion. And so the story goes a little something like this, right? One day, Eshu is walking down the street, and there's a farm on one side and a farm on the other side. And Eshu is like, I'm kind of bored. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna put on my two-sided hat. And they have, I don't have a hat like this, but they have a hat that is red on one side and black on the other side. And they put on this hat and they walk down the street between these two farms. And on one side there's a farmer, and on the other side is a farmer. And they both see this person walking by, and they both wave to him. And Eshu goes on his way. And then at the end of the day, when the farm work is done, the farmers wash off the tools, and they go into the village, and they go to the local tavern, and they have a drink, and they're talking to each other and telling the stories of their day, and talking about what's growing and what the weather's going to be like next week, and this, that, and the other thing. Anyone have any good seeds for sale, or blah blah blah, whatever farmers talk about. And in the course of this conversation, one of the farmers is like, "Hey, did you see that dude with the red hat walking down the street?" The other farmer's like, nah, but I did see a guy with a black hat walking down the street. And the first farmer's like, what do you mean? That hat was red. And he's like, no, it's not. It's black. He's like, you're crazy. Right? I don't know if I trust you anymore, because like you were obviously losing your mind. That man was wearing a red hat. No, he wasn't. He was wearing a black hat. And it comes to blows, right? This erupts into a bar fight. They're out in the street. They're punching each other. One of them breaks a bottle and holds it to the other one's throat. The other one pulls out a knife. They're about to kill each other, and it gets broken up by the people. The police come. They take them before the court of law, right? This is a very Jupiterian thing, and they are trying these people to try and alleviate, to get to the bottom of this conflict. And as they are giving their depositions, one of them's like, this man is this man is crazy. It was a black hat, and the other one's like, this dude is losing his mind and should be institutionalized. It was a red hat. And Ishu stands up at the back of the courtroom and is like, haha, you're both right. Haha, it's my two-sided hat. One side's red, one side's black. Haha. Right. And Ishu does this to sow discord, to like create conflict and struggle, right? Because this helps society to organize itself, right? It breaks down what we think we know and forces us to think about things in new ways, in different ways, right? Who knew you could have a hat that had two colors on it? Right. And Bayo Akumalafe talks about Issue and the trickster, and this quote that he has like sticks with me, is that the trickster scratches at the edge of reality until they bleed, and the edges of reality are forced to change and morph, right? And so, as Jupiter, this planet of coherence, right, is entering into Gemini, it is like standing in one field, watching somebody walk by with like a red colored hat on. And Jupiter's like, that's what it is. That dude's wearing a red hat, right? But we also have to hold the space for the other truth, which is this person is wearing a black hat, right? Or that it might be a green hat, depending on what angle we look at it from. And what Gemini is going to teach Jupiter is that truth is not just this one truth. Truth is multifaceted. And we have the opportunity to look at the stories from a variety of different ways. And what we are being asked is to stay curious, right? To question, to be able to hold multiple truths and multiple stories simultaneously, which is very challenging because I think that humans naturally seek coherence. We seek coherent structures, things that make sense. And when things don't make sense, they get very, it gets frightening. And so I think what we're gonna need to do is like sit with it's okay that it doesn't make sense. It's okay to not know. It's okay to ask questions. And to be able to again hold those opposites until a secret third thing emerges. Um, and so the last kind of thing that I want to bring in here is um, right. So Jupiter again is this like coherent idea, right? Like these are the systems. This is like educational system, legal system, right? These kind of systems that are supposed to function towards an ideal, right? An ideal society, an enlightened society, right? And I think what's going to happen and what has been happening, and I think that this is going to increase, is it's like, who is this system actually functioning for? Who is this actually helping? You know, and I think the legal system is a really good example of this. You know, we have this ideal of like truth and justice for all, and justice is blind, right? And which is like the Jupiterian, I'm on Olympus, like looking down on a two-dimensional map of like that says truth and justice for all, right? And then in the actual physical reality of it, I don't think it functions that way. And you know, being able to question what are these systems and who are they benefiting, right? And how do they actually function? I think this is what is going to happen with Jupiter and Gemini. And I think that is very threatening to these systems. And I think we're, you know, we saw this during the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Questioning like what is the function of the police? Who are they working for? How are they working? How can we do this differently? And there's a lot of pushback, and there still is a lot of pushback about that. But I think these questions are really important to ask. And I think we're seeing this in the educational system, you know, with students being like, where is this tuition money going? Right? What am I funding with all this money that I'm spending here? You know, and it seems like universities were very threatened by those questions to the point where they called out the police, like Saturnian forces of state violence against people who were like asking questions. You know, and I think that this is what happens when the gods get threatened, is they, you know, Jupiter like throws a lightning bolt, right? Or like Saturn calls out the stormtroopers. But the maybe last question that I want to say is in the kind of initiating myth Mercury, Hermes, right? Who, when they were just a little bit of bitty baby, 1 day old, crawled out of their cave and stole Apollo's cattle. And Apollo, who is like the golden boy, got very butthurt about this, and is like, "I'm gonna tell my dad. I'm telling Zeus about you." And Mercury's like, bro, like you're losing it. I'm a little baby. How can I steal cattle? Right? That's impossible. I'm just 1 day old. Look at me. I'm so cute. Right? And so Apollo like drags him to Zeus, and Apollo's like, he stole my cattle, he stole my cattle, and Mercury's like, "Man, I'm just a little baby, I could never." And Zeus is like, "I see through that, and I like that. I like your trickery, kid." So we have again like Apollo, who is this like coherence. It is the plastic arts, the Apollonian music and philosophy and poetry, right? These things that are like very meaningful and like structured and intellectual. And then we have Mercury, who's like, fuck it, And Zeus is like, I like both of these things. And so what I think, I hope, is that we can hold both of these things. We can hold the structures that can help us function, and we can also question them, right? And we can push on the edges of them until they morph and change, without having everything like utterly implode. I don't think like this is not a signature of like the world ending or things blowing up, but this is an opportunity to learn how to hold multiple truths, right? And to let go of our need to know and our need to be right, and to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more curious, a little bit more open to the possibilities of what can emerge when we say we don't know, and we can just sit in the tension of the opposites. And with that, my friends, I have reached my time. So go in peace. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. Sarah, if you want to DM me on Astrostar about a reading, please feel free, and I can let you know sometimes that I'm available. I don't think I've updated my schedule yet, so I can do that. And for the rest of y'all, if you're interested in getting an astrology reading, you can find me on the excellent Astrostar Live app. And yeah. I'll be doing a talk with Bear Hickman on the Astrostar Live app on Tuesday at 7:30 Mountain Time, 6:30 Pacific Time, 9:30 Eastern Time, um, about the Sagittarius full moon and all about the archetypes of the Archer and the Twins. So that'll be pretty awesome. And you can find that exclusively on Astrostar Live. Other than that, I think that is all the news that is fit to print. I will stop one of these and stay on for just a minute more if anyone has any questions or final thoughts. So thank you all.